Hello and welcome to our Retire Early Lifestyle, and today we're going to talk about a few cities in various Latin American countries that are popular with expats. We're going to hit some of the popular countries and their most popular cities with expats. Are you ready? Let's get started. Sao Paulo, Brazil. The two most popular cities in Brazil for expats to live are Sao Paulo, the financial hub, and Rio de Janeiro, the port city. Both have high crime rates. These two cities are where most of the expats live. There are certain ways you have to behave when you move to Brazil. Most Brazilians will think Americans are billionaires. That means being viewed as a rich American, and you will be gringo gouged. You may be targeted for a petty crime, and you may be pickpocketed or robbed and or worse if you're not careful. You're considered a walking, talking ATM to most people, and the reason for that is simple: financial disparity between us and them as a culture. As Americans, our median household income is 5 or 6 times the size of theirs. Even if that is not necessarily true on an individual level, on a cultural level, it is the general principle. Everything needs to be taken into account. So how much is the average salary in Brazil? Well, the average salary is 3,000 to 4,500 Brazilian reals, which is about $600 to $900 per month. This is relatively modest wage. So that right there answers why you are looked at as if you are a billionaire to Brazilians and other developing countries and their people. Before you move anywhere abroad, you want to know what types of crimes are there and where they're at. Once you know the type of crime, you will be ahead of the game as a rich American. Curiously, crime rates have fallen in the country of Brazil, particularly murder rates, but Brazilians say they feel less safe now. Here's what the locals are saying. There is a paradoxical reality in Brazil today. While murders have fallen to record lows, Brazilians are deeply concerned about criminal violence. But despite the record low murder rates, Brazilians feel less safe. Our suggestion to you: unless you know Portuguese and can negotiate and get the locally priced deals, your best bet is to shop at the major grocery stores and don't bother with the mercados, which can be very sketchy in Brazil anyway. Don't go out with wads of cash, and don't be out on the streets after dark, no matter where you live in Brazil. When you get cash out of the ATM, do it during the day inside a bank. Remember, you're a billionaire coming from one of the richest countries in the world where everyone is a billionaire. You've been labeled, and Americans do have to put up with the consequences of that label when they move abroad. Don't flaunt your riches even if you are rich. The GDP disparity in Brazil and the USA is huge and is why you're rich and they're not. On to number 4, Cancun, Mexico. Cancun is one of those popular destinations where expats say they either love it or hate it, but it's very popular with those expats who love it. Cancun is also a beloved tourist destination. We recommend never living permanently in a tourist destination, but some Americans love to do that. Unfortunately, there is nowhere in Mexico where you are not considered to be a rich American, and Cancun, being a tourist hotspot, sometimes has a fine line between the price differences of tourism and residency. Remember, we've said before on this channel, tourists pay tourist prices and permanent residents should pay what the locals pay. Of course, if you live in a total expat neighborhood, you're going to pay the tourist rate. That's the general rule. If you want to find a nice, decent, middle-class Mexican neighborhood, you can often find rental rates much less. We lived in a nice middle-class Mexican neighborhood in Baja, and it was a safe area. Home invasions never happened to anyone there while we read headlines of the expat neighborhoods getting broken into. Unfortunately, though, with the way things have changed and the internet has increased traffic to these places exponentially, even that may not work for long. By the way, Expats think living in a middle-class Mexican-only neighborhood would be more unsafe than an expat enclave, but the opposite is true. While it is true that for many expats it would be a nightmare since they don't or won't learn the local language, for those adventurous enough to break out of the old dog new tricks label, it opens up a whole lot of flexibility for you. You don't want to live in a bad or poor neighborhood though, or you will have problems. Secondly, if you know some basic Spanish, that will help you out a lot if you need to negotiate prices with some of the Mexican folks that don't speak English. Just another reason why anyone moving to a Spanish-speaking country should know at least conversational Spanish. Your fluency doesn't have to be perfect, but just enough so you don't feel helpless and confused. Helpless and confused are bad in countries where you are considered the rich American, even though you're not. Helpless and confused can get you in a whole lot of trouble and break your pocketbook. We noticed the 3 years living in Mexico in both Baja and Puerto Vallarta, the minute they knew we spoke Spanish and knew what the local prices were, their whole attitude changed towards us. Now, I don't want to scare anyone, but this is a true story, and we have lots of interesting stories just like these. Very early in the morning, Frank had to go to the bus station in Ensenada, and so we had our landlord call us a taxi rather than just hail one off the street that early in the morning, which really is the safe thing to do anyway. So the guy came and picked Frank up. Everything seemed normal, but he was driving in completely the opposite direction of the bus station. And finally, Frank said to him with a firm tone in perfect Spanish, "This is not the way to the bus station. Where are you going?" And the guy flinched a bit and said, well, I'm going to turn around in a minute. In the meantime, he asked Frank, "How long have you lived in Baja?" And Frank replied again in perfect Spanish, 3 years. And again, the guy seemed taken aback. Why? Because at first he thought Frank was more of the typical foreigner that is new to Mexico, that doesn't speak Spanish and doesn't know his way around the city. Surprise! Not all gringos are the same. But to make this story short, where was the taxi driver taking Frank? He ended up getting to the bus station safe and sound, but it is stuff like this where if you seem helpless and confused, they will take advantage of that in whatever way they do. Overcharging, taking you to bad guys who can then extort money from you. Where was the taxi going? That's what keeps us wondering. Medellin, Colombia. The thing with Medellin and why I listed it here is local authorities say crime is down in Medellin, but not expat crime. There are always two types of crimes in these countries. The criminal cartel crime that isn't necessarily out to get the tourist, and then you have the tourist expat crime, and you are the target. Since you are the target of crimes in tourist areas, you need to know how to behave. The crimes against expats in Medellin are numerous, and they have a multitude of scams like the dating app scam and others where they extort you for more and more money. The scammers get smarter and smarter too after they see what works and what doesn't. And then there is Bogota, Colombia, Bogota is more of the financial hub of Colombia, and so the Americans that live there tend to be more well off. Maybe they're billionaires. We were really curious to see the crime differences between these two expat hotspots, and here they are. Bogota shows quite a bit more crime, but remember, there is general crime and there is tourist crime. The biggest problem we see with Americans going to these developing countries is that $20 you have in your pocket goes way further for the locals in Colombia than it would for you in America. They don't even make $20 a day. Our suggestion for Americans moving to Colombia is first learn basic Spanish, be aware of your surroundings, find out what all the crime scams are so you can avoid them. Don't go out alone after dark, shop in the local grocery stores, and don't flaunt anything of value. And above all, stay off the dating apps. Guayaquil, Duran, Ecuador. Guayaquil has always been and still is unsafe, even before the cartels moved in and started infighting amongst one another. Right before we left Ecuador, Guayaquil was seeing tons of tourism, though. In fact, Guayaquil was getting more tourists than anywhere else in Ecuador. Many expats fled when the crime started getting really bad, but some stayed behind and still live in one of the most violent cities in the world. We visited Guayaquil on several occasions, and we knew where to stay, how much to pay, where to walk, where not to go, what types of crimes. It's good to know all this before you go. There is an area in Guayaquil that is policed for tourism. They don't want to lose the revenue that tourism brings into the country, and that area is like a 7-block by 5-block area, which includes the famous Malecon 2000, where they have many tourist attractions, boat rides, Ferris wheel rides, numerous restaurants, and shopping. If you stay on the Malecon, it is quite safe during the day. But things can and do change quickly once the sun goes down. Still, there are crimes of opportunity here just like anywhere else, and you are more of a target of a robbery or pickpocket in the tourist areas just because they think the treasure will be bigger if they rob a rich American than a local, and it probably is. They work in groups. Here is one story we'll share with you before we end this video. When we lived in Salinas, Ecuador coast, about 1.5 hours from Guayaquil, we got caught out at dusk, and it was getting darker by the minute though. While heading back to our apartment, a woman stopped us with a baby, and she asked for money for her and her baby. We already knew not to carry money when we were just out for a walk, so we told her, "No, we're sorry, we didn't have any money," and we continued to walk away. I turned around and saw her walking toward 2 guys on the other side of the street. And Frank and I picked up our pace to get back, being aware that they may follow us to our apartment. Our apartment was only 2 blocks back from the Salinas Malecon, but once you get off the Malecon, there are no people and there are no tourist police. You're on your own. So we had to keep watching our surroundings to make sure we were not being followed. This is the kind of thing you must do when you live in some of these developing countries abroad. Nothing like that ever happened to us during the day. Clearly, even running a little late on our way back, too close to dusk, increases the probabilities exponentially. The song, "The Freaks Come Out at Night," comes to mind, and we learned that if we push it, they will ring our doorbell sooner or later, no matter where we are. So anyway, that's what we have for you today. We hope you stay safe wherever you are. Be blessed and take care. Bye-bye.